It was September 4, 1893, when local authorities rolled up to a remote farmhouse in Birmingham, New York, after neighbors started getting suspicious about Paul Halliday's sudden disappearance. What they uncovered would stun the nation and cement one woman's terrifying legacy until her final days. In the barn, hidden under piles of hay, investigators found the bodies of two women, both shot dead. They were Margaret and Sarah McQuillan, New York locals tied to the enigmatic Lizzie Hall. But that grim find was just the start. Days later, Paul Halliday's mutilated body was discovered beneath the floorboards of his own home, also shot in what looked like a cold, calculated execution. The prime suspect? She was still on the property. Lizzie Halliday, Paul's wife, was taken into custody right away. During questioning, she acted wild, ripping her clothes and babbling incoherently. Some investigators thought she was faking insanity, but her bizarre behavior would soon define her as one of America's most infamous female serial killers. This wasn't where her story began. It was just the moment the nation first heard the name of a woman who'd later be called one of the 19th century's most dangerous criminals. As investigators dug into Lizzie's past, they found a trail of death and chaos stretching across states and possibly multiple husbands. That Catskill farmhouse discovery was merely the surface of a case that would grip the nation and upend everything people thought about women who kill. Eliza Margaret McNall was born around 1859 in County Antrim, Ireland, into a world of poverty and hardship. Her family moved to the U.S. when she was young. Some say she was 3, others say 8. The McNalls settled in New York City with their 9 kids, joining countless Irish immigrants chasing a better life. Growing up in the city's tenements, young Lizzie quickly stood out. She was called a criminal prodigy with murderous tendencies that apparently started early. The chaotic immigrant neighborhoods of Manhattan in the 1860s and 70s were the perfect place for a troubled kid to slip through society's cracks. Life in the McNall household was tough, like it was for many immigrant families struggling in America's fast-growing cities. The details of Lizzie's childhood are hazy, but one thing's clear. Whatever happened in those early years turned her into something far more dangerous than anyone could have predicted. By adulthood, Lizzie was already showing red flags: manipulative, charming when it suited her, and scarily good at playing the victim. Those traits would fuel the deadly game she was about to start. In 1879, at 20, Lizzie married her first husband, a Greenwich, New York man named Charles Hopkins, whose real name was Ketpool Brown. They had a son, but tragedy seemed to follow Lizzie. Hopkins died in 1881, and their son later ended up institutionalized, sparking questions about Lizzie's fitness as a mother. Back then, Hopkins's death was chalked up to natural causes, but as Lizzie's pattern emerged, investigators wondered if she'd claimed her first victim. The young widow showed little grief and quickly moved on to her next husband. This became her pattern: a string of dead or ditched husbands and an inability to keep stable relationships. Soon after Hopkins' death, Lizzie married Artemus Brewer, a pensioner who seemed to offer the stability she wanted. Like her first husband, Brewer didn't last long. He died within a year. No one suspected foul play at the time, and Lizzie moved on. Her third husband, Hiram Parkinson, was luckier, or maybe sharper. He left her within a year, possibly sensing something dangerous. Next, Lizzie married George Smith, a war veteran who'd served with Brewer, but Smith's military instincts might have saved him. After Lizzie allegedly tried to poison him with arsenic in his tea, he survived, and she fled to Vermont. There, she married Charles Plaisdell, but her restless nature took over. She vanished 2 weeks later, leaving another confused and maybe relieved husband behind. By winter 1888, Lizzie popped up in Philadelphia as Maggie Hopkins. She stayed at a saloon run by the McQuillans, Irish friends from her homeland. There, her crimes got bolder and better documented. She opened a shop, but it was a front for insurance fraud. When investigators proved she'd burned it down to collect the payout, she was sentenced to 2 years in Eastern State Penitentiary. That conviction was her first real brush with the law, but it didn't slow her down. Prison was more of an inconvenience than a wake-up call. After her release, she was ready to reinvent herself and find her next target. In 1889, as Lizzie Brown, she became housekeeper for Paul Halliday, a twice-widowed 70-year-old farmer in Birmingham, New York, with plenty of property, making him a prime mark for someone like her. They married, but trouble started early. Paul described Lizzie's sporadic spells of insanity, not just mood swings, but deeply disturbing behavior that should have been a warning. Within 2 years, the Halliday family's house and barn mysteriously burned down. Lizzie was suspected of arson, but she was slick at dodging blame, always playing the victim. Her crimes escalated. She stole horses, got a neighbor to help drive them to Newburgh, New York, and sold them for cash. Arrested for theft, she was acquitted on insanity grounds, showing how well she could manipulate the system by acting unstable. The most chilling incident came in May 1891, when the Halliday house burned again, this time killing Paul's intellectually disabled son, John. Lizzie claimed John died heroically trying to save her, casting herself as a grieving stepmother. But investigators found John's bedroom door locked from the outside, with Lizzie holding the key, evidence he'd been trapped to die in the fire. Soon after, she burned down the Halliday barn and mill, wiping out Paul's property. She tried to flee with another man but was caught and sent to an asylum. Her stay was short. After a transfer to another asylum, she was declared cured and released, returning to Paul, who'd soon pay the ultimate price for trusting her. Paul Halliday vanished in August 1893. When neighbors asked, Lizzie coolly said he was off doing masonry work in a nearby town. It sounded believable at first, but Paul was reliable, and days without word raised red flags. Around that time, Margaret and Sarah McQuillan had come to stay with the Hallidays, the same McQuillans who'd helped Lizzie in Philadelphia. Their visit seemed like a friendly reunion, but it would prove deadly. When investigators got a search warrant and arrived at the Halliday property on September 4, 1893, they made a horrifying discovery that shook the nation. Margaret and Sarah McQuillan were found buried in hay in the barn, both shot dead. The careful way their bodies were hidden suggested a killer who planned to cover their tracks. Days later, Paul Halliday's mutilated body was found under his home's floorboards, also shot with signs of extra violence post-mortem. The scene wasn't just brutal. It showed a killer at ease with murder, likely experienced. The body placement, concealment, and lack of remorse pointed to a calculating mind that saw lives as disposable. Lizzie was gone when authorities arrived, having fled into the wilderness, but that only confirmed her guilt. A massive manhunt spanned multiple states, and this time she couldn't escape. Taken into custody, her behavior in jail became as infamous as her crimes. She refused food, attacked the sheriff's wife, set her bed on fire, and tried to kill herself multiple times. Once attempting to hang herself, another time cutting her throat with broken glass. When asked about the wound, she chillingly said, "I thought I would cut myself to see if I would bleed." Her jailers had to chain her to the floor for months in Sullivan County Jail. Was this genuine madness or a performance for an insanity defense? Opinions split. Some saw real instability, others a cunning act. While jailed, Lizzie became a national sensation, with tabloid stories spreading nationwide. The New York World called her case unprecedented and almost without parallel in the annals of crime. Journalist Nellie Bly secured an interview, where Lizzie shared details about her past marriages, which Bly confirmed. The Sullivan County Sheriff fanned the flames, claiming Lizzie might be linked to Jack the Ripper's London murders, a baseless but headline-grabbing suggestion that showed how much her crimes captivated the public. As investigators dug deeper, her full criminal career emerged. 5 husbands before Paul, 2 dead within a year, 1 nearly poisoned. The press speculated about more murders, though, as the New York Times noted in June 1894. Whether those deaths were natural or not remained unclear. Margaret McQuillan had come from Ireland, surviving the immigrant struggle and earning a reputation as a hard-working woman who helped others. Her Philadelphia connection to Lizzie came from offering her shelter as Maggie Hopkins. Sarah McQuillan, Margaret's companion, was a cheerful young woman with dreams of a better life. Staying with the Hallidays seemed like a chance for stability, but it was a fatal mistake. Paul Halliday, a respected farmer, had built his success through hard work. Twice widowed, he valued companionship and was generous to those in need. His choice to marry Lizzie and welcome the McQuillans reflected his kindness. a tragic irony, as all three died for trusting her. On June 21, 1894, Lizzie was convicted in Sullivan County's Oyer and Terminer Court for the murders of Margaret and Sarah McQuillan, becoming the first woman sentenced to death by electrocution in New York's new electric chair. The trial was global news, with reporters dissecting every detail. The prosecution's evidence was overwhelming: crime scene proof, witness accounts of Lizzie's odd behavior, and expert analysis of the brutal killings. The defense claimed insanity, arguing she wasn't responsible, but her calculated crimes and cool demeanor in court weakened their case. Lizzie showed no remorse, more focused on media attention than the charges. She'd act erratic at times, which some saw as mental illness, others as a ploy to dodge accountability. The jury took less than a day to deliver guilty verdicts on multiple murder counts, reflecting the evidence's strength and the crime's horror. When the death sentence was read, Lizzie barely reacted, staying cold as ever. Her case made headlines worldwide, raising questions about gender, justice, and the death penalty that lingered long after. Despite the sentence, Lizzie's story didn't end. Governor Roswell P. Flower commuted her sentence to life in a mental institution after a medical commission declared her insane. She was sent to Matawan State Hospital for the criminally insane, where she'd spend her remaining years. At first, she seemed like a model patient, earning sewing privileges and access to tools like scissors. That trust proved deadly. She grew close to Nellie Wicks, an attendant at Matawan, forming what seemed like a real friendship. But when Wicks planned to leave the institution, Lizzie couldn't handle it. In 1906, she killed Wicks, stabbing her 200 times with scissors. The murder showed Lizzie's violence wasn't just about men or money. She killed when she lost control, revealing deep psychological issues that made her one of the era's most dangerous criminals. The attack's brutality, 200 stab wounds, proved her violent nature hadn't faded, even after years in an asylum. Lizzie Halliday died of Bright's disease on June 28, 1918, after nearly half her life in confinement. Her death closed one of America's most notorious criminal sagas, but her legacy lived on, reshaping views on female criminals and mental illness. Her case challenged assumptions about women and violence, showing they could be as brutal and calculated as men. It became a cautionary tale about judging by appearances and the need for thorough investigations. The media frenzy set the tone for true crime reporting, with sensational headlines, vivid violence, and focus on the killer's psyche becoming staples. Lizzie became one of America's first celebrity criminals, her infamy enduring. Even now, over a century later, her case fascinates true crime fans and criminologists, offering insights into female serial killers and the evolution of criminal investigation.